Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Born Political. We're live again. A very exciting show for you tonight. It is the fifth show. I still want to remind people in the beginning of the show that I am not the political figure that's going to rant and rave about what my opinions are. The point of my show is to interview guests that I think are very interesting, people that are part of our town, the fabric of our town, and not get to the bottom of some issues that are bothering us, but talk about more the person behind the job, the person that's making things happen. In this case, this week, I'm excited. It's not a political figure. We've had a few political figures and non-political figures, but tonight we're actually gonna. It's a town employee, someone that many of you would know if you have anything to do with the community, with the senior center, or we're gonna call it Thrive55, and we're gonna talk about that a little tonight. You'll notice that some of the literature that comes out has changed. And there's a good reason for it. We discussed it last week. I was supposed to do this show last week, in fact, and I want to thank my guests for coming back this week because I sometimes forget to email people what the show's about and who's going to be here that day. So I thank you for coming again this week. This is actually my second show because we had a great conversation last week. I'm very, very excited to introduce my guest, Mary Jo Riley from the Senior Center. Mary Jo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
You are, and so the show's premise is to get to the who. Who's Mary Jo Riley? I always start with, what's the size of your family, where you're from, like those types of questions.
I'm pretty local. I grew up in East Lyme, in Niantic, actually, out in Black Point, down by the beaches, and married somebody from Norwich, and had two kids who went through the Norwich school system and still live in Norwich and have been at the Senior Center, which is now Thrive55 Plus, for 27 years.
27 years.
Yeah.
And what was the experience with NFA? I mean, I'm a New London guy, and I went to school in New London, and then, my kids went to Fitch. And I always looked at NFA as just this monstrous. Did they go to NFA or was it?
It was huge.
It is.
I think my son's graduating class was 800 students, and it was more like a small college campus, but it afforded them opportunities. They thrived there. So I liked the school system, but it really was, they had to really show themselves. They had to talk to the instructors because there's so many kids.
There are 800. To put it in perspective, I think everyone in the region assumes because it's called New London County and that's the center and that's the city, that the school is enormous. In 1989, I graduated with 93 kids.
Yeah.
That was the size of my class, and I think my wife graduated with 220 from Fitch. So when you think about the size of what 800 kids in one class looks like, it's enormous. But I was wondering because I know a lot of kids that went there, but to get it from a parent's perspective and what they thought. We're trying to dig to maybe we don't talk about where you lean politically. You are a town employee. A lot of times town employees just say I'm apolitical, but where you get your opinions from and how you might look at a subject is what we're trying to figure out. And your career took you from high school to college, which was, we got to talk last week.
Yes.
And I think that is where my formative years were in high school for sure. I never had the college experience, but I'm guessing that your college life had a lot to do with who you are today, or.
I went to Syracuse for my undergraduate.
That used to be called the enemy. We're UConn fans.
Yes, but I also went to UConn for my master's,
okay.
So it leveled out that way. But I was third generation to go to Syracuse. I went on a full ride athletic scholarship for rowing. If you ever go to East Lyme High School, there's a boat named after me hanging from the ceiling of the atrium there, and I went and I picked college for the sport, I'll have to admit, but it was a good experience because, it was almost like a full-time job and you went to school because you were training all the time. Rowing is all year long. It's not, you have a fall season and you have a spring season. So it really, for me, it was more teaching me how to stay organized, to plan my time, to decide what I was going to be doing. I have an undergraduate degree, actually a dual degree from Syracuse, one in clinical dietetics and one in food science. So they were close enough together that I could take some extra classes just to get the second degree. And then came back to Connecticut, worked for the Women's, Infants, Children's program as a dietitian, but I also coached rowing at the time and competed myself. And then I decided to go back to graduate school because I really loved the coaching, so I wanted to get more into that, and I got a master's in sports medicine from UConn. And
what a life.
So I was thinking I was going to do this coaching gig, and I was coaching young women. It was junior women in rowing at the national level, and a lot of the teams were girls from East Lyme and Old Lyme High School going to the national championships, and then they would go on and train if they got selected for the national team, and I just did the local. So I coached for Blood Street, which is well known in this area for rowing as a club sport. And while I was doing that, got my graduate degree, thought I'll go into more professional coaching, but I happened to get a job at Mystic Community Center, and I was working there, and a nurse in cardiac rehab said, "Oh, you've got the background. We need somebody who has an exercise physiology background, a sports medicine background to work with our cardiac patients." So from there, I worked with them. I actually got a job at L&M as non-invasive coordinator for cardiology. So I was doing cardiac rehab, exercise, training people that all had heart disease.
Okay, so that's a little bit like coaching.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're, but what drove you to college were sports. What a lot of the academics you took were leaning towards, hey, I want to coach one day.
Yeah.
And so you didn't have you had the opportunity to coach at Blood Street, and I think you probably wanted to be a college coach. I think we talked a little bit last week.
Yeah.
But to me, after we had that conversation, I thought about how far, women's sports has come a long way, Title 19 from years and years ago, but now we've even seen a woman coach that is going to coach college basketball or one of the men's sports. And I think the doors have been open, but a lot of the knocking was from folks like you.
And I think back when I was at Syracuse, I was on the Title IX committee, and it was really funny how we all of a sudden were supported by the university my freshman year, so we got new equipment, and how the men were kind of insulted. Why are the women getting new equipment? Well, we were dogging it with this broken down stuff that we would fiberglass and try to put the boat back together. And when we were recognized as an official sport, we got new stuff. And so it was really kind of funny how the men's team took it, but now we were kind of on an equal playing field. We had good equipment, they had good equipment. We had a coach, they had a coach. And so I think that and that's in the 70s, so I'll date myself, but back then, we were struggling to get that equal footing, and I think women nowadays realize that, I can coach. Yep. It's not just men that need to coach, and I think women are taking more of that leadership role, and we see that in sports. But you also see men still coaching women's team, but I think women are trying to break through. There are some women in NFL that
the
are
referees.
Yep.
A couple. Yeah, there is an NFL coach.
Yeah, defensive line coach. That's a woman.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more and more of that, and I think it's a good thing. It does bring me back to the political part. The political part of all that is without a push from somebody, a constituent, or maybe a woman's team that was unhappy that they weren't getting funding and the boys' team was, and they went to a legislator at some point. I think any law or rule we have in this country came from somewhere, and it started somewhere, either through frustration or somebody had something really bad happen to them. But to see the change from what it was probably when you were a student athlete to where it is now, is not even recognizable, I would guess.
Oh, it's amazing.
You started off with a bad boat with a hole in it, and, and look at you got a new boat.
And it was, just uniforms. We used to buy T-shirts at the bookstore that matched, and that was our uniform. To when I graduated, we actually got uniforms. So it was more the showing support through the university. And then when I was coaching, a lot of women coached at the junior level. And so that was a good thing. And it was kind of fun for me because there were women that were Olympians that were coaching against me.
Yep.
And I love that. I always thought that was great because I actually had an exceptional team for the time that went out and placed second at the nationals and medaled. And, people were like, where's this team coming from? We've never heard of them before. Yeah. And so
you've got a new coach now.
Yeah, we kind of made a new name for ourselves, and I really love the coaching part. And I think the athletes played a big role in that because they were very independent. They were motivated by themselves to do well. So, I lucked out. It was a good
I think
good
we're kindred
few
spirits
years.
in that way because to me, I've been called a bunch of titles. I've been called a bunch of things, not always the nicest. But when I think of, when you think of the titles that you have in your life, I'm a son, a husband, being dad is unbelievable. I'm a Lolo now. If Lolo, my wife is Lola, I'm Lolo. So that's a Filipino way of saying grandma and grandpa. So
nice.
I have a little 3-year-old grandson who's growing quickly. But those are titles that just come as you have a family. The one title that will always stick with me, and I'm probably one of the most proud of, is coach.
Yeah.
I got to coach youth, and I'm 50 now, but I coached when I was 16 years old, a 12-year-old division. So I'll have 46-year-old men come up to me and say, "How you doing, coach?" And people look and say, "How could you be their coach? That guy's my age, and you're not even much older." But to be able to transfer some kind of knowledge to somebody. Or see somebody be successful after you did something, and it must be taking a team that to go into a place and have some say, "Who's this team? Where'd they come from?" And that you had something to do with the reason why everyone knows who you are now.
Yeah.
And to probably, I'm sure you have folks that or former athletes that you coached call you maybe or see you in a store, and to be called coach, it's something not everyone gets to say it because not everyone coach. I encourage it.
Yeah.
I coached wrestling, and I never wrestled one day in high school. But there was a really good wrestling coach, and they needed extra help. And I can teach an 8-year-old almost anything basic if you teach me the basics.
Right.
And I got really into the sport. My son got into the sport. But I encourage everyone to at least, someone should call you coach at some point in your life, right? Teach them something.
Exactly. And it's like you said, and you take those skills from coaching. I took to my job at the hospital where I was working with people that were cardiac patients or at risk for heart disease and kind of coaching them through. You got to make these lifestyle changes so that you don't have another heart attack or you don't have a stroke. And I was laid off in the 90s when L&M laid off 10% of their workforce. So I was laid off with a whole bunch of good people. And they said, go back and talk to somebody you worked for to see if they had a job available. So I did, and it happened to be Lyda, who was Parks and Rec director at the time for Groton. And he said, I got a job coming up, and if you can wait around. So I worked other part-time jobs and kept in touch. And when a program supervisor came up at the senior center, I was like, I'm ready. This will be fun.
And we're glad that we're glad that someone reached out. But I'm also last week when we talked about it, to look back. And I think a lot of people don't do that. Right. They get caught up if they lost a job. Now I think there's a lot of opportunity. If you lost a job, it's easier to find a job right now because there are so many openings. But a lot of times people just try to look forward and they're banging on new doors. When a lot of times it's reaching out to your friends and people that saw you perform already at another level or in a different type of job. Sounds like a lot of the jobs you had have been relatable. They kind of brought you to where you are now.
Yeah.
But in the end, you kind of called an old friend or you called someone that you formerly worked with. And I don't think a lot of people do that. There's connections that we all have, and it doesn't have to be for a job. It could.
Right.
I said, if you need an older car, I'll put on Facebook, hey, I'm looking for a car for my niece or nephew, because somebody's gonna say, oh, you know what? I got that thing sitting in the garage, and I'm not going to use it anymore.
Right.
Those are the types of connections that I think. What I was hopeful of, I thought Facebook was going to be this great communicative device where it would made the world better. And I still have hope for it.
Yeah.
But like we talked off air about the negativity that can come through Facebook. But the reality is there are a lot of good connections we can make. And I think that was one thing I took away from our conversation last week, how you actually looked back and then that kind of propelled you forward to where you are.
Oh, yeah. And it was probably, for me, I always said it was the best thing that ever happened, more because, I had different jobs and I kind of stayed at them for a couple years, and then it wasn't a challenge enough. And when I started at the senior center, I had been told that the supervisor would be leaving in a couple of years. And so I was like, well, I'd be interested in that and moving up. So I did that. And then it was kind of like there was always something new to do, something new and challenging. And I think the biggest thing was when we looked at renovating the building and going from the small building we had to expanding to meet the needs of the current seniors in town and the residents.
Yep.
So that was a big plus. And since then, we've just added more programs, added more things going on at the center. And, I feel like the staff has blossomed.
Oh, God. Well, there's two ways that you can always look at a job, I think, or look at any problem. And you can walk into a senior center that was smaller and stayed cramped and didn't push any new programming in. But you're the person that walked in and said, you kept saying, well, there were a bunch of new things to keep doing.
Right.
And new things don't happen unless the people are pushing for new things.
Right.
Or you're listening to the folks that are showing up. And I think it's a shining star for Groton. What the senior center has become, and I know it's a team effort. I know a lot of the folks that work down there. I think I said before when they go, Joe, where you been? You haven't been around as much. It's like having a few, like say you have 3 kids, and there's one that's really struggling, and the other 2 have jobs and they're lawyers.
Yes.
You're going to stick around, and that's kind of what the senior center has done. And I get to be in different rooms. Right now, we're talking about a community center in Groton.
Right.
And if you hear a town councilor in a meeting speak about the possibilities of a community center, they immediately refer to, look what we did with the senior center.
Right.
Like what is possible. And just even talking to you last week about what COVID has done to our seniors and the tolls and the effects that it had. And we always wonder, what would the community be without a senior center? It costs a lot of money, right? They have this big budget. But I think what we saw was people that came back afterwards and talking to you that they weren't as healthy as they were before the senior center closed. They had other problems that would have resulted in hospital stays and things that, and I want you to touch base on that because I hadn't even thought about that until we talked about it, but you were surprised.
The isolation and people being stuck they listened. They were told to stay at home.
They were.
And so they stayed at home, and so they lost touch with other people. They weren't exercising. They weren't going out and walking. They didn't have something to stimulate their brain because they were watching TV. Some of them were on the computer on Facebook. But they weren't really connecting with anybody. And that's one of the things we found was that there were so many people that came back that had developed some dementia or physically had declined so much by not coming 3 days a week to exercise and not coming another 2 days a week to do an art class or quilting or something that stimulated their brain. And so we found a lot of people regressed or declined really quickly in those 18 months we were closed. And so now we're trying to build them back up. And one of the important things I think of the center as a whole is the fact that the seniors take ownership in it. They volunteer. they will tell you what they like and they don't like.
Really? Because I've noticed that too.
And but it's because they take ownership in it and they have ideas and they want to do things. And by being stuck at home for over a year, they weren't doing what kept them active and kept them connected and engaged in things. So a big thing we did during that time was we went virtual. We had been starting virtual programs prior to COVID, but we did a lot of connection online. We did exercise programs online. That works for a while, but then you find that they've had, okay, I'm Zoomed enough. Yeah. I want to see people in person. I want to be there. Yeah. So now we're working on still keeping contact with some people that are not able to come back because they physically can't. And so we're doing hybrid programs so they can Zoom with their friends, even though their friends are at the center doing something.
Yep. So yeah, I think the challenge is to reach out. And I think you're meeting that challenge to me because just the name change. I had no idea that name was going to change. And I was going to lead into this a little bit because a lot of the folks that are out there and you have the opportunity to become a part, if you're 55 and older, to become part of this, not just beautiful facility, but community. Yeah. And a lot of people they're cautious because for some reason you think if you sign up and get that membership and step into that door, you have instantly become an elderly citizen or an old person. But what I see when I walk in is life. I see connection. I see a lot of different things. I'm excited because nobody wants to get older, right? But I will be 55, and that's gonna make me qualify for a gym that's very close to my house. So that's something I would sign up for right away. It's something I want to be part of, and they do a lot of fun things. But the change in the name, it's funny because when you call something senior center, and I think a lot of folks, because I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't understand it. Why would you change it? Now I don't even know it's a senior center." But senior is associated with someone that's 95 years old in a lot of people's heads. And I think you're looking to change the narrative. And I like the Thrive55. I think it rolls. I think what we have to do, and I know you're trying, is to make sure people get it out. And it actually says, okay, 55 is the number. It's not 65 or 75 or 85. But you have some stories 55. Of people that are 80 and say they're not ready, right? They're not.
Yeah, my dad was one. I'm not going to a senior center. I'm not that old. And he's 80. And I'm like, Dad, we've got pinochle. We've got food. You love to eat,
Food's every age.
And so we got him to the Groton Senior Center from Niantic. And I got him to go to the senior center in Niantic because they needed drivers for Meals on Wheels. And he loves to talk. So it was great for him to go around and deliver meals and talk with people. And there was one specific gentleman he always put last on his list so he could stay. And if you see Meals on Wheels, the commercial where the guy's singing to the lady and staying, no, they don't have the time for that. The drivers are literally going, checking the person, are you okay? How's your day? Yeah. And they're out of there. So for Dad to spend that few minutes and say, okay, I'm going to put you at the end of the list so I can stay and chat for an hour, that was something he really enjoyed doing. And I grew up, Dad worked at EB, and he worked at EB for 30 years. And so he knew people, a lot of people. And, this was for him kind of a way to give back to the community too. Yeah.
And I think because I am a state representative, but I also did the council and the RTM, I became very familiar with programs like Meals on Wheels, TVCCA, which is in the center of a neighborhood that most people, unless you drove in through Pequannock Bridge, you may never know it exists, but they serve 85 children there. Yeah. From 3 months, I think, or 6 months to 3 years old. All these little things that happen in our community that we don't really understand that are connected to funding. Right. That in the ultimate end has to get voted on by a town council or a state legislature, and those are programs that, oddly enough, because we struggle in government, I think, to quantify a benefit. We only know what we spend, but we don't know the benefit of your father delivering a meal to his fellow senior and him or her getting that interaction for maybe it was only 15 minutes. Maybe it sounds like he set him up for the last call, so they're probably an hour or who knows how long
Knowing
they go. But that's how we have to, and that's why I love this show, because we get to connect stories like that and stories that you get to see in real life and what those dollars for Meals on Wheels mean. I mean, federally they try to cut that program substantially, but it's really one of those programs that we would absolutely want to keep going.
And one of the points I always try to get across is our budget for the senior center would keep 7 people in a nursing home for a year, and we serve over 3,500. So we are trying to keep them active, part of the community, paying taxes, buying groceries, being part of everything that goes on, versus in a nursing home where they're at their end stage usually of life if you're in a nursing home now. So to me it's important because they're out there doing things. Yeah. And again, the senior center is, as you know, not always just for seniors. We do a lot of community events.
Super Bowl.
Yep, Super Bowl's coming up.
Yeah, they played out Super Bowl Saturday.
Yeah. Yep, the day before the football game.
Oh yeah, that's good. The Gnog show looks like it's going to be on again, possibly.
Hopefully the end of February we'll be doing the Gnog show, which used to be the Gong show.
Can't say that. There's a big history behind that, but I probably can't even say Gong show on this show because it's right. Yeah, well, we can because I guess we're in conversation. But so many great things that you guys do. The Gnog show. I've been lucky to be a judge. I've done it like 2 or 3 times, I think. But it's just to see the talent even that we have in our senior center is unbelievable. And we're already, I knew this was going to happen because we had the conversation last week, but we're down to only a couple minutes. So is there anything that you wanted to say about that you want to announce about the Thrive55, or we're almost to the end here?
I think for me, I say use the building. If you're 55 and older and you don't see something that we could be offering, let us know, because I have a great staff. They plan a lot. We are working back to being open in the evening. We have some fitness programs going on, so if you're working, we do have programs. We have an aging mastery program that's run in the evening that helps you prepare to retire. And there's a lot going on. It's not your grandmother's senior center.
It's not. And that is a great last word. This is Joe Delacruz, Born Political. I want to thank you guys for being here again this week. This was a great guest to me because this is our first, it's a town employee. It's someone who's the feet on the ground, the cog that makes the towns, that makes it go. I'm going to continue to do that and reach out to other organizations within the town. We have all these great departments that do all this great work. And they do the reach out. They really try to get everybody out and involved. And no better place is it shown than at the senior center. That, like she mentioned, the Super Bowl Saturday coming up. That's something that I always enjoyed because it's food. But if you have someone in your life that is 55 and older, and you see this show and they're not members, they should at least come down, walk the building, look at the gym, see what's happening. Because at 55 years old, you can guarantee that Joe Delacruz will be taking advantage of it because it is a beautiful facility. And hopefully, if you're someone who's thinking about the community center and maybe you're thinking it's too expensive or the council, you don't agree with the council trying to set money aside for it, I absolutely implore you to go to the Groton Senior Center, Thrive55. Make sure you go in and see the building, see the work that's being done. And I can guarantee you, if we had the right accountant to figure out how much money we're saving by making sure people are active and having a good life, it'd be an absolute no-brainer. So again, this is Born Political. Till next Thursday, we'll see you live then. I'm Joe Delacruz. I want to thank my guest, Mary Jo. Thank you for coming on. Great show and great to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks.